Hi, this is no ordinary voice of spiritual ventriloquism. You are listening to the dummy himself. Part 2. Was a woman's hair given her for a covering? Well, in the last video, we went over 1 Corinthians chapter 11. If you haven't watched part 1 video, probably should go back and watch part 1 so you can catch up to speed on the direction of this discussion, and so you can fully appreciate this part. Okay. Now I know I left everybody on the cliff with that on the end, and I was going to tell you that 1 Corinthians 11:15, the last verse, says that a woman's hair was given her for a covering. Now, it is not just my position, but the position of several scholars, namely Dr. Tony Martin of Xavier University, who wrote an epic paper, Paul's Argument from Nature for the Veil, okay, namely about women, whatnot. Okay, and I've always wondered about this verse in 1 Corinthians because, you know, from a Greek perspective, yeah, we could say that's parabolian, an overhanging garment, a veil, and, you know, yeah, a woman should wear that, huh? Okay, that's great, and a man shouldn't wear that, okay? But because Paul is talking about two different issues in this text, one is hair length or hair on either a male or female, and the other issue he's bringing up is a veil or the absence of a veil, especially when praying or some type of, public visible thing. I think you should do this in private. If you're a female, you should wear a head covering on your head, and I'm about ready to tell you why. Okay? A woman's hair was not given her for a parabolian, for a covering, an overhanging garment, a concealment. Okay? Her hair does not function in that respect. The Bible says her hair is her glory, or the glory of her husband. Okay? The esteem of her husband. Hence why I spoke about the need for a head covering briefly, because of sexual attraction. Okay? A woman's hair, I'm not going to get into the scientific thing right now because, I mean, it's not what I want to do right here, right now. But the hair does not function as a sexual organ, but it does function as an extension of her sexuality. Okay? All right? So I'm going to go ahead, and there was a man, a Greek man, that used this word parabolian in another way. And I want to get to that. His name was Euripides, and we'll try to find that. Okay, here we go. This is what Euripides had to say. Okay? Since parabolian is contrasted with hair, which is part of the body, the physiological semantic domain of parabolian in 1 Corinthians 11:15b, or that overhanging garment, but because it's being held in contrast to hair length, it becomes particularly relevant. And this is words from Dr. Tony Martin. Okay? Euripides in Hercules something 1269, in reference to a body part, he casts Hercules as complaining, quote, "After I received my bags of flesh, which are the outward signs of puberty." I received labors about which I shall undertake to say what is necessary. Okay? A dynamic translation of the first clause would be, after I received my testicles, which are the outward signs of puberty. In this text, Euripides, the term parabolian refers to a testicle. Now, following this line of thinking, okay, when it comes to the woman, this application, because normally that word should be, if you was going to translate that word, orcus, okay? Why didn't he use the word orcus? That's where we get the word orchid from, the flower, okay? Why didn't he use the word orcus if he was talking about text? Why did he use parabolian, which is which is an overhanging garment, very much akin to the tallit that some of the Jewish men wore in the day, okay? And I'm going to get to men's head coverings and what. And that's the reason why I'm backtracking, and I made the comment about the baseball cap in the first video and praying, and I made the comment about the turban on the high priest. I'm going to go into that a little more, okay? But it says that her hair was given her for a covering is not the right thing. We have to remember, Paul was a Hebrew. Paul is talking to a Greek audience, a Corinthian audience. And also the references to the shaving of the hair or cutting of the hair I've already discussed in the first video. They were actually doing that part and parcel with the temple prostitution thing too. Though I'm sure that was pretty much all straight sex, because the Corinthians were a form of the Greeks, or a part of the Greek society that didn't look too highly on catamites and that other word, which I'm going to get to, and I'll use that one directly. Okay, if I get banned, fine. I'll keep a copy of the video. We can put it on Patreon or something. It shall survive. Anyway, so yeah, and that's why it ties into Romans 1, chapter 1, verse 26, about a woman leaving the natural use of the man, and, basically taking on, or at least one of them, or all of them, I don't know, acting like men, in every way, both public and private, okay? So, that Greek word, orcus, should have been used, but it wasn't. And like I said, we need to remember that Paul was a Hebrew. He's talking to a Corinthian audience. Hebrews did not speak directly of sexual things or things pertaining to the reproductive system or the genitalia. They always veiled that in an idiom, or they used language or words in such a way that they call it implying or, hinting, at. They would use other words to where the listener, the hearer could all readily understand what he was saying, okay? Whereas, a foreigner would be like, what? So anyway, that's what they did. Like I said, in the Song of Solomon, he used a hand. That was an idiom or a word change where he didn't have to say whatever the word, penis or something like that was in Hebrew. In Ezekiel 6, angels had wings to cover their feet. That should be translated testicles, to cover their testicles. But because of the way Hebrew uses that language, they didn't speak of it directly. They veiled it in an idiom or used another word. In Job 38, he talks about the behemoth, and it says he swings his tail like a cedar. That is a phallic reference, okay? His sinews are so closely so tight and close that, no air can pass through them. And only a man can tell you what that is. So we're not going to get to any more of that. I want to throw that out there. That's what Paul's saying. Okay? And Paul had a legitimate fear for women to put some type of an overhanging garment over their hair because of angels. Okay? Talked about that in the first video. Okay? We'll go to there. Okay? All right? So, anyway, I kind of jumping ahead where I wanted to be, but I want to drive this idea home in Hebrew that the subject of covering and uncovering almost always involves some type of sexual relationship. Leviticus 18 is replete. You shall not uncover the nakedness of. You shall not, blah, blah, blah. And the concept of covering, okay, to cover a woman would be to take responsibility for her spiritual guidance and protection, and obviously by implication, you're not going to do that generally. We're not talking about a pastoral covering here, where a pastor has to act and be an intercessor for like single women or whatever. That's not talking about a pastoral covering. I'm talking about just a man like me or you going out and covering a woman always involves a sexual relationship. Okay? There may be aspects, you may bring an old woman into the house, an aged woman, then that would be more along the line of a pastoral protection and covering. So yeah, even people like us could cover women in that respect. So without having a sexual relationship. But generally, the idea involves the reproductive system, the genitalia, and sex. Okay? Look it up. Go study it out. All right? So I want to get back to this. I want to go back to what Paul said in Genesis 6, 1 through 4. Okay? And remember, I told you that Paul's appeal was to nature. Okay? Does not nature itself. Now, we understand that at least in the case of a man, okay, nature left to itself can get out of control. So, and a good example of that was Yah built a garden, an outdoor temple of sorts, okay, in the earth that he created at a particular location. And then he put man in there to dress and to keep it, okay? So in other words, Yah is the life and the creative power of Yah is so powerful, even to this day. If you don't take means by which to tame that nature, to subdue that nature, to control and guide and cultivate that nature, it's just going to go wild, okay? Men can grow long hair like a woman, but that doesn't mean nature is predicate that a man just let his hair grow like a woman. Now, I know there is a certain, a Torah example of that being the law of the Nazarite. That was usually for a specified period of time. Some, maybe for life. But most of the time, it was more like a dedication period, like a fasting or something like that. Could go a year, could go 5 years. Who knows? It could go just months. So that was the one exception to the rule, okay? And like I said, going back to that video where that person was attacking Ringo, the reason I brought up that issue was because in nature you see men with, long hair, in nature you see animals with long hair. But we want to stick to the human, what do you say, man. We want to stick to man right here, right now. So, yeah, one of the very first phrases in the Bible to man was Yah gave him dominion over all of the earth, the fishes of the sea, the fowls of the air, okay, the beasts of the field. And then he says something else. He said, you shall rule over them. And it is without exception, every time that word is used, rule over them or to rule them, okay, means to subjugate with violence. So even with the animal kingdom or the life forms that are outside of man, the creatures that are outside of man, there was a natural struggle, at least between wild beasts of the field, like lions and hyenas and stuff like that, coyotes, and man and his tending doing animal husbandry. Because you see this show up in the curses of Deuteronomy 28 as what will happen when men do not obey Yah. And you also see this again in Isaiah, where it's prophetically spoken of that these curses will be removed. The wolf shall lie down with the kid. The lion shall eat straw like an ox, and they shall gender together. So in other words, there will be no, and Yah said, I will make a covenant with the beasts of the field that they shall no more devour your cattle. So, they're just up there. But he didn't make a beast of the covenant of field with the deer and the rabbit, the salmon and all of that. This all has to do with man and his animal husbandry. And probably his crops as well, his grain crops. Destructive birds like crows and ravens won't come in and pull up your corn and wheat and stuff like that. So I don't want to digress too much, but the point being, if man does not rule over the nature of his head, his hair is going to grow out long. Okay? And for whatever reason, because of the warrior aspect of man, because of the occupations that man has, like blacksmiths and forging furnaces and other means, building trades. You can't have a 3-foot ponytail swinging around you all day. It's just not pragmatic for a man. So man is natural for a man to pull his head. Man is the one who has been given, or at least was given at the outset, the ability to determine the course in which nature was going to take. Not just with the animals, not just with the garden, but also with himself. Okay? And as he continues to walk in the light of the counsel of Yahweh, he is able to subdue everything, nature around him, and even within him. And he can become, what do you say, a ruler. Okay? All right. Probably enough on that. So we're going to go back to where did the head coverings come from? There's only one event. Leading up to this event, in Genesis 6, probably head coverings were neither a cultural or theological issue, okay? I don't know, I wasn't there, okay? All I know is that now all of a sudden in the New Testament, Paul is looking back to something of ancient times that even precedes Moses, okay? Moses' law. And he's going back, and there's only one event in all of Scripture where Paul's appeal, or I'll say Paul's statement that a woman in 15b of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul says that a woman's, for this cause, it's not 15b, it's a verse prior to that. He said, for this cause shall a woman have power on her head because of the angels. And like I referred to before, don't go trolling into the footnotes, because it's going to say, or have freedom of choice regarding her head. Okay? All right. So, Paul is appealing here when he says, if a woman is glory, okay. All right. For this reason, in verse 10, says, for this reason, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, for this reason a woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. It doesn't specify what type, what caliber of angels. We just know that they're spirit beings, okay? And honestly, if you don't understand that tiered structure of the divine construct, then, you know, and that's why I recommended that book. But we're going to go back here to Genesis 6. It says, when people began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that they were fair, and they took wives for themselves. Sons of God is B'nai Ha Elohim. Okay? These are creatures. Okay? But they are higher than man. Okay? The sons of God saw that they were fair, and they took wives for themselves, all of that they chose. Then the Lord said, the Master said, my spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh. Their days shall be 120 years. That's another theological teaching. The Nephilim were on earth in those days. The Nephilim were the offspring, according to the book of Enoch, according to other writings, both secular and profane, writings outside of the corpus of this particular book, in Judaism, and also in other ancient Near Eastern cultures. This is where the idea of the Anunnaki came from. In some of the other cultures, that word was used. I'm not sure whether that was Babylonian mythos or one of the others. I believe it was Babylonian. So anyway, the Nephilim, the giants, were in the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans. This is the NRSV, or the daughters of men, who bore children to them. So in other words, that's not talking about marriage. It just says they went into them. You know, there was no prescribed formula for a official or unofficial marriage back then. It was pretty much what it was. And if they were choosing the women, perhaps maybe the women were attracted to them. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I know this, they took them wives. And the word take also suggests to that same word rule, okay, to subjugate with violence. That's actually what rape is, or sexual assault, or what do you want to call it. So these children were born to them, and these children were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown, okay. Gilgamesh is one example of that. Goliath, Og of Bashan, who was probably, these giants were probably 8 to 9 feet tall, maybe 10 feet tall. Doesn't really matter. The idea is that When you start packing on meat and bone structure, that size, that is a giant, you know? So anyway, that's what that says. So I believe that this is the text Paul is referring to in verse 10, 1 Corinthians. And I think from this time forth, the idea of women veiling themselves began to evolve from a endo-tribal hand-down teaching type thing, oral transmission, okay? Which is why you don't really see it. But we know for a fact it had to be after this event because there's no cosmic event in Scripture that happens prior to this. I mean, we even know that when the first couple sinned, he just made them fig leaves and aprons. He didn't make fig leaf head coverings for Hava. He just made fig leaves and aprons to cover up their reproductive system. And as time went on, as nature began to become more volatile, you know, with seasons and cold and hot and stuff like that, then obviously, you know, additional clothing was either obtained by them without, you know, on their own, just as a natural evolution of, you know, shit, it's cold outside, I need something to cover up my, you know. But that wasn't there when Adam and Hava received their what we say, loins skins from Yah. He didn't make head covering for either one of them. So again, this is the idea here. Okay. All right. So 1 Corinthians 11:13. Okay. All right. Judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head unveiled? Now we're going to go back to this word that a woman's hair was given her not for a covering. Okay. Because it's the hair that acts as an extension of the woman's sexuality. Now I'll briefly touch into where Greek science was at this time through the writings of Hippocrates, Aristotle, and the like. The hair, they believed, the science of the day believed that the woman's hair actually functioned as a sex organ. And I think that's ridiculous. I think that that is absolutely crazy because they compare the fact that the woman's hair on her head would acted as an absorbent, which it would draw. It had a drawing force that would cause the male nefesh that was deposited in her to go up and fertilize the egg. And if she didn't have hair, if she cut off her hair, this is what the Greek science teached, that it would, or that's what they taught, that they would become infertile. As a matter of fact, one test for fertility in the Greek world of the day, of Paul's day, okay, was that if a woman was having difficulty bearing children, the man would place, or the doctor or physician or whatever, would place garlic inside her, you know, vagina. And then he would tell her to come back the next day. And then he would smell her head. And if her head smelled like garlic, she was pronounced fertile. If it didn't smell like garlic, then she would be pronounced infertile. Okay? So, anyway, and then I guess eventually, you know, since, you know, everybody crawled out of the caves and things like that, that they found out that bald women can get pregnant too. So, yeah, yeah. So, in other words, science of that day really didn't have a scientific method. They postulated, theorized, and a lot of their philosophizing about the mechanical aspects of the idea or the system of reproductivity was greatly skewed and flawed and error, because honestly they didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Okay, now like I said in the first video, these scientific ideas that went around, these are outside the scope of theology. So whether Paul believed the science or not doesn't matter. He is not appealing to the science of the day when he's making his case. Actually, he's appealing to the custom and the nature. Custom is phusis, nature is phusis in the Greek, or phosis. Actually, Paul is appealing to custom, and his appeal to nature is what had always been, as far back as he could know, or as the writings that he was exposed to, or the teaching was exposed to, about a woman's hair and a veil, and wearing a veil, through the theological practice of the Israelites. Okay, that's where these scientists got these ideas. This was so replete in the ancient world. In every culture, in every society, women generally wore a head covering, and the outward sign, and had long hair, and let her hair grow and didn't cut it. I'm not saying if you trim off the dead ends you're a blasphemer or something like that. I'm not saying that. That's between you and your husband. When you're out in public, your hair's up in a bun anyway, underneath the head covering. In Israel, it's pointless to even discuss this, okay? All right? But when your dead ends go all the way up to here, yeah, we're gonna have a talk about that, okay? Or when you're a man and your long hair starts coming down where you are almost indiscernible from a woman, then yes, you know, your hair is a shame to you. What? The word shame, the word covering, the word shame, the word testicle, all of these things they're all folded and going and conflueting back into the same core teaching, okay? Men had to, in Exodus 29, let's go there. We'll just go there. Exodus 29, all right? That's a great one right there. Yah gives Moses a command about making garments for the priests. Okay? Now, if anybody is going to be working within nature and custom, it's going to be them. Okay? All right. And it starts out with the consecration of the priest and the offering that is made for them. Okay? And then it says in verse 6, and you shall set the turban on his head, talking about the high priest, and put the holy diadem on the turban. You shall take the anointing oil and pour it on his head and anoint him. Then you shall bring his sons. Okay? A turban is like, you know, it doesn't hang down. It's not a parabolian in the Greek. It is like a mitre. You know, I ain't saying it's like what the Pope wears, you know, with the fish thing. All right? I'm just saying it is a turban and a mitre. It's the same word. The Hebrew word for that is mitznefet. Mitznefet is the word for turban. Okay? All right? And it doesn't conceal or veil his head. Okay? All right? That's the idea. Okay? So whether or not a tallit is legit or not, because it, according to the Greek, it's a parabolian, it hangs, it's a hanging garment. So in that sense, his head would be veiled to a degree. Now, With the woman, I contend that most of the time the face was mostly veiled. I ain't saying they wore the tank slit burqas or anything like that, but they usually probably had their, veiled like that over their mouth and stuff. So anyway, I'm not going to get into that. I just want to get into the hanging garment issue. So it was a Hebrew word, mitznefet, okay? And he was, in Zechariah, he was supposed to be given a clean turban. That's the word in the King James. It's fair mitre, okay? And then on that turban, a royal crown was placed, okay? And a turban would be like a head wrapping thing, Now, his sons, it says here, then he shall bring his sons and put tunics on them, garments, linen. You shall gird them with sashes and tie head dresses on them. Okay? Leviticus 29. All right? That head dress was an outer hat. But under their hat, but again, these head dresses did not these head dresses did not veil or conceal the head on men. You're going to tie head dresses on. And it would be something more akin to what we wear out there sometimes when we're doing construction or yard work or something, a bandana. Okay? All right? Now, underneath that bandana, they did wear a skull cap. Okay? Again, it didn't hang over their face and conceal them. And that skull cap in Hebrew is called migbah. It was a hemispherical linen hat. Somewhat like what I wear, where I've circumcised a baseball hat. And all it does is it's a dome shaped. That's exactly what this mitznefet is. It's a dome-shaped hat, okay, or cap, okay. It's like I said. It's not the fact that it's anything on your head. It is not to have a parabolian or an overhanging garment, which I would say, in order to be safe, I would not do the prayer shawl tunic. But if I'm going down the road, driving, you can communicate with Yah. Okay, that's not the point. The point is, if a man puts something like this on his head, okay, this is a veiling. This is a concealment, okay? Or if and then in Persia they had called mitharis. They had it like this, where it was only like beads hanging down and stuff like that. Okay? That's the issue that is being dealt with here. Not necessarily a Roman adaptation to superstition, to not have anything on your head covered. Now, if you want to be safe, take it off. Okay? That's great. Fine. Okay? But I'm just saying that when Yah specifically told the priest, see, Paul doesn't have the authority in 1 Corinthians to change what Yah himself commanded Moses. Okay? All right? So, and this is why I believe Paul gets a bad rap, because Christians love to go to Paul. They use him as their poster child. And they get Paul saying a lot of crap that he never said. Okay? All right? Paul never said anything about the mitznefet. Neither did he say anything about the turban. What he was talking about, let me see. I'm at the Western Wall. Or the Saturn hat, So I wanted to bring those differences out. Okay? So, in the Greek word for head, uncovered, and this is speaking to the man. Okay? Go back to 1 Corinthians 11. We hot today on 1 Corinthians 11. For a man ought not to have his head veiled or covered, since he is the image and reflection of Elohim. But the woman is the reflection of man. Okay? So, the Greek word for head, that a man should have his head uncovered and not veiled or covered, that Greek word is akatakaluptos. Okay? All right? And it literally means not having a veil hanging down from the head. That's what it means. So, from everything that I'm gathering, the rad practice of veiling your head, at least in public, and a male, is a dishonor to Yah, because you are taking on the role of a woman in that respect, and you were created in Yah's image. First male, then female. Okay? You got to make sure that, like I said, you got that hierarchy of authority, that descending, tiered system of authority working. Okay? All right. All right. So when it says a man head should be uncovered, that's akatakaluptos, which means not having a veil hanging down from the head. Okay? All right. All right. So, I want to get back to this. Now, we're looking about that we want to come back down to, we're going to come back to this word in verse 15, which should have been orchis, okay, in the Greek. But remember, we've got a Hebrew guy saying this, supposedly, okay? And if it is correct, and Paul did say this, which I believe he did. I don't believe this was an invention of the Roman Catholics later on when they began to start massaging the text, okay? I don't believe that. I believe Paul actually said this. I think that just some of these words are misleading if you don't understand the cultural background of the man that's teaching this. He's not a Greek. He's a Hebrew. He's not a Hellenist. He's a Hebrew. Okay? As a matter of fact, that was a point of contention between him and Kepha. He said to Kepha, he says, if you, being an Israelite, a Hebrew, live after the manner of the Greeks, why are you trying to compel the Greeks to live as Hebrews? And then you're going to shun them whenever the homies are around, and they're like redheaded stepchildren and second-class citizens, when they are supposed to be joint heirs into the kingdom. Yeah, that Paul, and that Kepha, okay, or that Shul, and that Kepha. All right? So, we're going to get back to this verse here again. For her hair is given to her instead of a testicle. All right? We got to go back up. Okay? For if a woman will not veil herself. Okay? Go back to Exodus 29. Let's go back. What is she covering up? All right? And I got to get that text right now. I'll just quote it. He said to the sons, it may not have been Exodus 29, it may have been another one. He told them to make linen breeches, or these they're like underpants or something, long underwear or something like that. So that when they went up to the altar, that their nakedness would not be discovered. Okay? There is something about serving Yah that Yah's not interested in seeing your nuts swinging while you're tending to Him in prayer or worship or service in the temple, sacrificing, burning incense, and all that stuff. He wanted your reproductive area covered. Again, go all the way back. Who told you you were naked? Oh, well, now since you're naked, I'm going to make skins for you, Adam, and I'm going to make them specifically for your reproductive area on the body. So it goes all the way back to Yah's response to the state of man in his disobedient condition at that point was to put a covering of skin over his body, his reproductive area. Okay? So the teaching here is that men should not have their testicles showing when they're serving Yah. Okay? And by the same token, when you go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, and you see that Paul's referring to something far else because of Paul's custom, because of Paul's tradition, because of Paul's theological views and his history and his mandate to bring the Gentiles into the commonwealth of Israel. Wasn't creating a new religion. Okay? He wasn't saying, out with the old, in with the new. Now that is true in certain respects. Okay? But that is not true altogether. Paul was he was baby stepping these Greek converts to line up and attenuate their life, their manner of behavior, more in tune with the Hebrews, the Israelites. Okay, 1 Corinthians or Acts chapter 15. That was the whole point. They baby stepped them in these things. We're going to give them just a little list of things that they need to do because they can't have all this stuff on them right now. They're in a completely different culture. They came from a completely different cut of cloth. Okay? You can't pile all this stuff on them in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. Okay? And you can't, and conversion is not a process that happens in a day like down at the Baptist church or the Methodist church or whatever. Conversion is a process of discipleship and teaching and discipline and things like that. That's what conversion truly is. And when thou art converted, strengthen the brethren. Okay? I mean, just last week, Brother TJ did a video saying that he was going to be, because he's in this conversion process, which is really what he was saying. He said, for a while, 5 years or whatever, I'm just going to learn. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn. That's a wise man. That's a wise man already. No doubt. Hallelujah. Okay? All right? Let's go, TJ. Go. Anyway, so by the same token, if the woman's hair, and it was given her, or at least I believe it was, regardless of what the Greek words that are being used and mishmashed around, we already know that the subject of covering and uncovering has 4,000 years of history that has to do with a testicular reference, that has to do with progenerative activity, i.e. intercourse. Now Paul is telling a woman that she should cover her head. Why? Makes perfect sense. If the hair is given her instead of a testicle, then it's not proper for her to have her sexuality, her reproductive symbolism exposed in front of Yah when she's in official service of Yah as a temple servant, when she's in official service of Yah as supplicating to him and worshiping him and adoring him in official capacity, especially the leading women, especially in public. Okay? God don't want to see your nuts, and he don't want to see the woman's nuts either. Okay? Cover your head. That's all it's saying. Okay? Because that is specifically identifying her hair as an extension of her reproductive capacity, her what do you say, romantic, or I don't even like that word, but we'll just say her sexual attraction to males. If she's of reproductive age, and especially if she's married, she's not to be out there showing her. I mean, she might as well, pray with her legs open, I mean, that's actually what Paul is saying here. I know this is heavy. I know people are going to say, whoa, this is unbelievable. But the text is there. It's there, and it's solid. It's rock solid. Can't argue with it. It's there. The principles, the precepts are all there leading up to what Paul is saying. Okay? So a woman has to cover her head when she's praying, or if she's even out in public, outside of the confines of her own home. If she's married, if she's of reproductive age, she should have her head covered. Simple as that. That's what Paul's teaching here. Okay? And I'll say now the following instructions, for her hair is given to her instead of a testicle, but if anyone is disposed to be contentious, if anybody wants to be contentious, we have no such custom. We don't have ideas contrary to this principle, to this precept, to this theological teaching that Paul is trying to convey here to our post-exilic Western minds, who want to say, there's not a single thing in all of Torah that says a man or a woman is supposed to cover their head when they pray, or not have their head covered when they pray. I'm sorry, but there is. It's there. Exodus 29. All right? And it's not one verse. It's a whole passage. Okay? All right. And Zechariah as well. But if anyone is disposed to be contentious, we have no such custom, nor do the assemblies of God, or churches of God, or the assembly of Israel. Okay? We have no such custom. Okay? All right? We don't have a custom that lines up with your contentions, because you're coming from a separate culture. You're coming from a separate people. Okay? And your ideas about what should be and what shouldn't be have been formed and fashioned to the metal of the society and culture that you have been reared up in. You know? We may be Israelites, and we may consciously endeavor and strive to enter in that straight gate. All right? But subconsciously, there's a lot of training that's gone on in our minds. Subconsciously, from the culture that we have grown up in. Pastor Dow has talked about that as well. Talked about a superfluity. There's Paul, he said, let us cleanse ourselves of all filthiness of the flesh and of the spirit. Okay? It's talking about the conscious man and the subconscious man. how to walk and be sober and vigilant, because you give the devil one opening, man, he'll come in, and it's a free for all from that point forward. So this video has been even longer. I'm about 4 minutes longer than the last video. Let's just suffice it as this: a woman's hair is an extension of her sexuality. She should be covered, have an outer wrap or a covering on to cover her hair, her esteem, her husband's esteem, actually, so that she can honor her head and not expose her nakedness to other men, and not to expose it to Yah. Woman, your hair is your husband's esteem, not Yah's esteem. Oh, we know he's got the x-ray vision glasses and all of that stuff, but he ain't looking at that. He's looking at the practice of being, subjected to the things that are at least subjected, and hopefully ultimately being submitted to what Yah requires and what he desires, okay, for us. Okay, the woman's hair was not given to her for a covering. Her hair was given to her instead of a testicle. And now I'm going to stop here. We're going to go over to the men's side and to the science of the day in the next video, and hopefully that will wrap everything up. I hope somebody learned something. I hope that I have been of just a little bit of value here to be able to increase us. Knowledge is not going to save us, but knowledge that is correct will enhance our lives, and that it will make our lives down here a lot less problematic and a lot more satisfying. Okay? All right? Shalom.